All right, all right. Hey, Mr. Robinson, that's me. I'm here. You're welcome. So, look, today going more over the Cold War, all right, because that's what the whole unit is. It's on is the Cold War. So, in particularly the administration of one John Fitzgerald Kennedy, who was the 35th president of the United States. We're going to look at him, things that led him to become president, and then some big events that happened while he was president. Now, he wasn't president for very long. It was about 3 years, kind of a short time, because he was assassinated. The last president we've had to be assassinated. So, just going to go over it. This is what the assignment is on. I put the link to the textbook on Canvas there for you. So, trying to help you out, and now I'm going to give you some knowledge. All right, the election of 1960. This is when Kennedy he gets elected president of the United States. John F. Kennedy there on the bottom, Richard Milhous Nixon there on the top. So Nixon had been vice president, Kennedy a young senator from Massachusetts. Now, this is important. This is on the assignment. Is the impact of television, the first nationally televised debate ever? Okay, so now we have debates every election, and they're always televised. This was the very first one, the 60 election. Kennedy, he's appearing young, vigorous, whereas Nixon kind of appeared to be befuddled, or he was sweating on camera. He just didn't seem as calm or as sharp as John F. Kennedy did. And this is very important because it led a lot of Americans to see Kennedy as more presidential or more of a leader than Nixon. Okay, even though Nixon, you could argue, was better prepared to be president because he had been vice president, he had been a congressman, he had, he had been in politics for a lot longer than Kennedy had. So Kennedy wins 1960 election, takes a hard line on communism. All right, this is important because there's going to be a couple big events that happen while he's president that we're going to get into and study here. One, so this is kind of a background of what's going on in Cuba. Cuba had a revolution, okay? The Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro. They turned to communism, all right? So Cuba, if you study Cuban history, remember, they got their independence with that Spanish-American War, but America still kind of had a hand or played a role in Cuba. Well, now the regime that was backed by America, led by Fulgencio Batista, Fidel Castro overthrows him. All right, and they start a communist regime in Cuba. So a lot of these Cubans, they don't like communism. Remember, America is against communism. That's what the whole Cold War is about. So a lot of these Cubans go into exile, and a lot of them go to America, okay, to escape communism. This is important. So with that, America does not like communism. Cuba is only 90 miles away. They and now they're communists. So America's like, no, they see that as a threat. They see a country that's only 90 miles away that's communist as a threat to American democracy. So what they do is America, under the Kennedy administration, gives money to these Cuban exiles to go back to Cuba and invade Cuba and start a democratic revolution to try to overthrow Castro's communist regime that was in Cuba. It's known as the attack at the Bay of Pigs. All right, important. It's a failure. Okay, it does not work. Um, these Cuban exiles that America gives money to go back to Cuba and start a democratic revolution, they're wiped out and they're destroyed by Castro's communist regime. And this is largely an embarrassment to the Kennedy administration. Okay, so this is the early days of Kennedy's presidency, and it looks really bad on him. It's a bad look for him, and he proclaims. He said, "From now on, I'm going to be in control. I'm not going to listen to all these people who are telling me to do this," because he was kind of skeptical of the invasion in its first place. He said, "From now on, I'm going to call the shots. I'm going to take more control of this." So it's seen as a defining moment in his presidency, and then we're going to get to the next moment here in a second. So Cuba, now that the United States has tried to overthrow Castro and his regime in Cuba, Cuba is going to turn to the Soviet Union, right, the big communist power in the world, for protection. Also, something that's going on, not that it's important, is this building of the Berlin Wall, which separates Berlin to an East Berlin and a West Berlin, right? And basically, it's a symbol of communism. So on the eastern side is communist Berlin, on the western side is democratic Berlin. And you have these stories of people trying to escape from the east to the west, trying to cross over this wall, and sometimes they're shot or killed when they're trying to escape to West Berlin. So that's just something that you need to know. Now, this is the other defining moment in Kennedy's administration, what's known as the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's really a very important event in American history. So remember, the Cubans had turned to the Soviets for protection. They formed an alliance there. Well, what the Soviets did was they took their nuclear missiles, because at this time they had developed nuclear weapons, and they placed them in Cuba, only 90 miles away from the United States. America sees this as a threat, okay? You have nuclear weapons aimed at us only 90 miles away. And America discovers this by via spy planes, okay? They send these planes over Cuba, and you see the picture there of nuclear missiles in Cuba. So what happens is Kennedy, he kind of, for lack of a better term, he mans up and tells the Soviets, he puts a blockade on Soviet ships going into Cuba. He says, you need to move those missiles out of Cuba. All right. Otherwise, there's going to be problems. And the world came, this is probably the closest the world's ever came to a nuclear war. All right. So, I mean, it was really on edge there whether America or the Soviet Union was going to fire a nuclear weapon at either country. All right. It's kind of on edge here. And so what happens is there's a hotline established where Kennedy can communicate with Nikita Khrushchev, who was the leader of the Soviet Union, to work out any problems. But what happens is the United States removed its missiles from Turkey, all right, because the United States had missiles in Turkey, which is right next to Russia. The Soviets removed their missiles from Cuba. So it's kind of a quid pro quo there, where both sides are agreeing to kind of stand down. And that's where the hotline is established. So it was, again, very close to a nuclear war, but luckily Kennedy was able to avert it, and Khrushchev agreed with it, and it's seen as a win for the Americans, because Kennedy, again, he took kind of a hard line against the Soviets and their nuclear weapons and communism, and Khrushchev is kind of seen as backing down, although he didn't really back down. It was, like I said, kind of a quid pro quo deal there. But hopefully this video here will help you with the assignment, and I put the textbook section on there too, so you can read that.